in Shanghai and in other cities around China, a certain amount of them took place among students in some of the very elite universities. Tsinghua University, for example, is the leading university of Communist Party officials and government leaders. And it's the elite university, it's the Oxford and Cambridge of China. Apparently there were protests there yesterday. And this began in the capital city of Urumqi. Now this is the Uyghur area of China. And the demonstrations 2 days ago, the BBC reported the same demonstrations. And they said, the BBC said, which I found very bizarre, it said people are saying, down with the lockdowns. Down with the lockdowns in China. Now I don't remember the BBC reporting very often about our protests in London or in Germany or in France or in Italy or in America or in Australia or New Zealand or anywhere else in the world when people were opposed to lockdowns. But now all of a sudden the BBC and the Western media are promoting the protests in China against lockdowns as if those protests are protests against the regime itself in China. Now, I want to put a bit of context. One, because I was involved in the anti-lockdown movement. Two, because I've been a journalist for the Chinese press since 2009. I've been working for a website called China.org.cn, which is the website of the State Council of the Government of China. In other words, the Cabinet Office of China. And I've been writing for them articles about all different subjects from 2009 until 2020. 2020, from that time onwards, they haven't published any articles by me. But, so you can't say I'm someone who's like, had no affinity or association with what's happening in China. I've been following very carefully what's happening in China and what happened around coronavirus. And at the beginning, you might remember I stood here on the 8th of March 2020 and I called for a type of shutdown by the workers actually in order to protect the people in Britain. I, however, changed my mind. As the weeks went by, I changed my mind and I began to question that narrative and I began to analyse what was going on. But let me just explain first of all about the lockdown in China. In China, we were told that in December 2019, some people got what was described as pneumonia of unknown origin. And pneumonia of unknown origin is supposed to be reported by national governments, by the health agencies of national governments, to the national authorities and the world authorities, i.e. the World Health Organization. But there was a study done in 2017, published on research, metadata research, on large-scale research in Holland and the United States of America. And that study showed that 50% of pneumonias recorded in America and Holland, and therefore you can assume around the world, particularly in less developed countries, far higher proportion. 50% of pneumonias were of unknown origin. I myself had pneumonia in 1995 and no doctor turned around and said, I know what has caused this. They just said you had pneumonia. I went to hospital. They said, had you not come to hospital that day, you would be dead today. So it was a serious pneumonia. Well, I spent 2 days in hospital. I came out, they gave me antibiotics. I came out, I was absolutely fine, fit right as rain. So if 50% of pneumonias in Europe and America were of unknown origin before 2017, and we can assume 2019, then why all the obsession with a few cases of pneumonia of unknown origin in China in December 2019? Now, there was a guy, you might remember how the news story broke in the West. It was gradually on the news. Something funny is going on in China. Something in Wuhan, something strange is happening. And then there was a story, a human interest story, that there's an eye doctor, his name is Li Wenyang, and he worked as an ophthalmologist, an eye specialist, in a Wuhan hospital. And he knew of some cases, or 1 or 2 cases, of pneumonia of unknown origin. And he said, I think, to 6 friends on a WeChat group, I think there's a new outbreak of SARS. And the Western media got hold of this story. He was taken into by the police and questioned and reprimanded for discussing this. And then it made the Western news. The Western news made it a really big story. One doctor in China reporting on a handful of cases of pneumonia of unknown origin, when 50% in the West are of unknown origin. So then this man was under enormous pressure, global spotlight on him, and he got a panic attack. When he had this panic attack, and whatever type of illness this was, which they later called COVID-19, then he had a cytokine storm, most likely, an autoimmune overreaction because of the focus on him from the entire world, and he died at 33 years of age. And that became world news. China is concealing what is happening in Wuhan and is responsible for an outbreak which could spread to the world. That was the story they told. And that story, by the way, continued to this day. But now we're told China is being too restrictive. For 2 years, don't forget, I need to remind you the timetable of this. In January 2020, on the 23rd of January, China locked down Wuhan, a city of 11 million, and Hubei province, a province of 65 million. So about the same population as Britain, a bit lower, but about the same. They locked them down. The whole world said, look, China's mad. They locked down.
I agree.
I know, you're a very ignorant man.
I agree.
Because you marched, they marched, anyway, I'll ignore it. So 23rd of January they locked down in Wuhan and Hubei province. By the way, about half of China has never had any lockdown at all. About half of China, including, by the way, Hong Kong, including Taiwan, and Japan. And Japan also had no lockdown, by the way, no lockdown. However, the people there did stay at home, a lot of them. When they were asked to, they stayed at home, but it wasn't a lockdown. But now we are being told that China, we were told at that time, this was draconian dictatorial measures. That's what we were told at the time, don't forget. Now, what happened then was, the Chinese looked at the data. In particular, the most important thing to understand was that before the lockdown in Wuhan and Hubei, there were 10 days, the 13th of January to the 23rd of January 2020, when, in advance of the New Year holiday in China, Chinese New Year, 5 million people left the city of Wuhan to go back to their hometowns. They live in the countryside, they live in other provinces, they live in other districts. They went back to their hometowns. And these are young migrant workers, healthy migrant workers. And what they discovered in China, in the 3 weeks after the first lockdown in China, was that hardly anybody of these migrants who left Wuhan called for Hubei to reopen less than 3 weeks after the first lockdown. But it didn't happen, because local governments, you know what happened in England, you know. Local government, when the lockdown came, they started going into a little frenzy, you know. They put these barriers up on the streets, they closed down the roads, they put signs on the streets, they had people stand inspecting who's open and who's closed. They had people on the doors of local shops, you can come in, you stay outside, you wear a mask, you do this, sanitize your hand, put them in the tube. Then all the little petty bureaucrats gained power, and suddenly they had the say. And the police officers, you know, our boys in blue, our democratic police. Suddenly they were charging into Hyde Park, sticks at the mark, in military formation, driving us out of Hyde Park for months and months and months on end, from March 23rd, 2020 until early this year. They were still arresting us, beating us up, detaining us. I was arrested 7 times by these goons, and not one of their arrests followed with a court case which was successful. So they were trying to intimidate the world. Now you must understand that when the lockdown ended in China, in Wuhan and Hubei, that was the 8th of April 2020. Seems a long time ago now. Because when they removed the lockdown in Hubei and Wuhan, we were in lockdown. And we went in and out of lockdown for 2 years. From 2020 March until the spring of 2022. In and out of lockdown. Every day, year in, year or for month in, month out for 2 years. Remember that. Every day. We like to forget. Because it's this nightmare that happened to the whole of humanity. And that happened in Britain. And we like to forget now because everything's open, you know. Winter wonderland. Now nobody knows how many people are infected. They guess that about 1 in 30 are affected now. Yeah, there's no lockdown anymore. Yeah, we got no specialist anymore. Yeah, we got no professor anymore. Yeah, we got no regulations anymore. No more PCR tests anymore. You don't even have to get a vaccination because they said in Germany, in Canada, and in Austria that if you don't get a vaccination, you will not be part of public life. I am making a speech about COVID in China. I need to explain the background, the totality, to understand what's happening. Because this is going to be the main news story for weeks on end. For weeks on end, I assure you. Don't forget, remember, we were told, the story's being repeated now. COVID escaped from a lab in Wuhan. That's what we were told. The Chinese are responsible for COVID. Don't forget, only a few months ago, the world was at peace and we were under COVID. Remember? Austria, Germany, France, extremely strict regulation. You couldn't travel to France unless you'd been vaccinated 2 times and had a stupid thing stuck up your nose. You couldn't come back from France if you hadn't had a stupid thing stuck up your nose to say positive or negative. You can't travel to America, even to this day, unless you've been vaccinated 3 times. So we know the nightmare they impose. So then you ask yourself, why are they talking now the way they're talking about China? Well, I want to go back to you, tell you some information you probably don't know. You know, we were told that there is nothing that you can advocate that cures people or prevents you from getting the illness called COVID-19. There's nothing you're allowed to advocate for which does this. Here. So this is what the Chinese government of Sichuan is the largest population province in China. This is from the government website of Sichuan from the 22nd of October 2022, only a few weeks ago. And it's technical guidelines for the prevention and control of novel coronavirus pneumonia by traditional Chinese medicine. And it says what you need to take. Now, remember, we weren't allowed to say you can take anything. This is official Chinese government statement, so you can't cut me off YouTube for this. What does it say? For the normal population, for preventative purposes, what you should take to stop yourself from getting COVID. It says 15 grams of mulberry leaves, 15 grams of chrysanthemum, 5 grams of almonds, 30 grams of forsythia, 15 grams of mint, 30 grams of bellflower, 15 grams of licorice, 30 grams of reed root,
and 30 grams of honeysuckle. That, according to the Sichuan government, is what you must take if you want to prevent catching COVID-19, the illness. And there are different things.
COVID-19 was 2 years ago.
What do you say?
COVID-19 was 2 years ago.
Let him talk, brother.
My
Let him
friend,
talk. He's having a speech.
Follow the discussion.
Go on for it.
It might be interesting to
Do
you.
continue,
Might not
sir.
be. If you don't want to follow it, there's plenty of people over there to listen to. Now, the whole, we were told that this is SARS-CoV-2, right? That's what we were told. SARS-CoV-2 causes COVID-19. Now, I can't dispute that because YouTube do not allow anyone to dispute that. But what I can do is I can talk about SARS. SARS-1.
Go on.
Now, here we have the website of the World Health Organization. And we all know the World Health Organization is the official voice of the world on health. They're the people we must listen to about everything to do with world health. And this is their statement on SARS. And it says, severe acute respiratory syndrome is a viral respiratory disease caused by SARS-associated coronavirus, first identified in February 2003. During an outbreak in China, it spread to 4 countries. The WHO coordinated the international investigation with the assistance of the Global Outbreak Alert and Response Network and worked closely with health authorities in affected countries to provide epidemiological, clinical and logistical support to bring the outbreak under control. Every single academic paper, every single national government and national health authority claim to this day that SARS disappeared from the world in 2004. Everyone know that? Everyone agree? That's what. And if you don't, you can check. You can check.
That's not factual.
SARS. What?
That's not factual. That it disappeared.
They claimed, and the WHO claims, and the British government claims, and all scientific papers, you can check on Google Scholar, they all claim SARS vanished from the planet. That's what they say. Now, what happened then was, there is one single academic paper in the world that contradicted that narrative. That paper I have in my hand here, at least the front page of it, and it is called here, this paper here, from Cornell University website. It's a peer-reviewed document, but unfortunately when the document was accepted for publication in 2013 by the website PLOS, I think it's called, which is a peer-reviewed scientific journal. This article, SARS-CoV, originated from bats in 1998 and may still exist in humans. What they did was, it says here at the bottom, anti-SARS-CoV seropositivity was detected in 20% of all samples tested from Guangzhou children. Guangzhou is a city of about 15 million. Guangzhou children who were born after 2005. But SARS disappeared from the world in 2004. And yet children born after 2005 in Guangzhou, a city of 15 million, had 20% seropositivity between 2010 and 2012. So if that paper is correct, from the blood samples from China, it means SARS never disappeared. If SARS never disappeared, then we don't need the appearance of SARS in Wuhan, SARS-CoV-2, in December 2019, do we? Because mutation, don't they all talk about mutations? Wuhan strain, India strain, Indian variant, Essex variant, the Omicron variant, the B2 variant. Don't they talk about that all the time? So if that's the case, is it not possible that SARS, which did not disappear and was at 20% of children in Guangzhou infected at some time in 2010 to 12, never disappeared anywhere else in the world? Perhaps it was never looked for in those 50% of cases of pneumonia of unknown origin that existed in Europe and America up until 2017. Now let me try and confirm this. Firstly, I'll say this paper is not just any paper. This paper has a co-author. See the name? Nan Shanzhong. Now Nan Shanzhong is the leading epidemiologist in China. He is the man in charge of the campaign now in China. He was the man in charge of the campaign in 2003 to 2004 in China. He is regarded as a national hero. He's more popular than Xi Jinping. He's more popular than any pop star. He's the most popular man in China. This is his article showing that SARS never disappeared. Now let me try and confirm this with data recently released or broadcast by Dr. John Campbell. Many of you will know he's a man who discussed the question of SARS over the last couple of years. A few days ago, he referred to an article from Italy. It was actually published in 2020. And no one wanted to know because at that time they were spreading the idea that Chinese people are unhealthy. They live with all sorts of wild animals, and therefore either from a lab leak or from their own disgusting behaviour, they spread this disease to the whole of the world. And China must pay. Remember that discussion. China must pay. Now put that in the context of the war in Ukraine. Didn't we move from COVID mania in Europe in February this year? All of a sudden, COVID disappeared from the news. We opened up and war began with Russia over Ukraine. Wasn't that the case? That all of a sudden, COVID was put in the back burner, the most important global health crisis in the world, and then Ukrainians were told, you can come to England, you can come to Germany, you can come to France, you don't need a COVID test, you don't need a vaccination, nothing. And all the restrictions were removed in one country after another, like nine pins or dominoes pushed over, one falling after another. Weren't they about to force the Canadian truckers to get a vaccination? Weren't they going to imprison anyone in Austria who left their home who hadn't had a vaccination? Weren't they going to sack 100,000 NHS workers who didn't have a vaccination in Britain, in our democracy? Weren't they going to do that? But then the war came and it was all forgotten. And instead of the NHS flags, instead of the save lives, stay at home, sanitize your hand, keep a distance, the masks were gone. The parties were open, the bars were open, the restaurants were open, and COVID spread like wildfire amongst the vaccinated, by the way. Amongst the vaccinated. They told you, if you run up and get a Pfizer juice, and run up and get Moderna juice, you'll save the other people, because you won't spread the virus. That's what they said. So we ran, you remember Mohammed Haji, great big Muslim guy, speaker, builder, bodybuilder. He ran off to go and get the vaccination. A few weeks later, he was here at Hyde Park, started coughing blood. He's a big, strong man, coughing blood. Some of his friends said we need to take him to hospital. He went to hospital, pulmonary embolism, caused, according to his doctors, by the vaccination. By the vaccination. There are many cases around the world. I don't have to cite them. Look on YouTube. There are reports, there are studies, there are investigations by congressional committees. There's even a parliamentary investigation now in Britain about this. So I don't have to invent this stuff. I don't have to be a conspiracy theorist. It's a fact that these vaccinations have caused harm amounts of significant number of people.
They've
I won't say
they've
how
also
many.
reduced the number of COVID cases.
What did they really reduce?
look
the number?
around.
They told us the vaccination will stop you spreading the disease. It was a lie. They told you it's 95% efficacious. That is a lie. It is not 95% efficacious. The total group studied was 40,000, 20,000 placebo, 20,000 injected. Pfizer study that would cause the experimental use of this vaccine to be allowed. Emergency use, better said. But of them, only 170 caught coronavirus. And of them, 8 of them were vaccinated and 162 were not vaccinated. That they called 95% efficacy. It's less than 1% efficacy because there were 40,000 people in the study, but they only considered 172. And by the way, none of them died. And they hid many of the illnesses that happened amongst the vaccinated. They knew, many of you know, when you got your vaccine, you came down ill. You got a headache. You got a painful arm. Some people got shivers. Some people got night sweats. Some people came down. Steve at Speaker's Corner came down. He said, I quote him, "I've never been so sick in my life for an entire week, but at least I could travel." Remember they said that? You can travel. Get your vaccine, you can travel.
Yeah,
Now they know statistics from government and scientific papers have shown a 300% increase, 300 times increased risk of getting inflammation of the heart amongst young boys, 17 to 18-year-olds, if they're vaccinated with the mRNA vaccine. 300 times likelihood of getting myocarditis and pericarditis. That's studied and proven. It's not my invention. These are scientifically proven facts. Now they're stuttering around. That creature of the dark, remember? A few months ago I went to a meeting, the Royal Statistical Society. Matt Hancock was sitting there. I asked him a question. He ran away. And then suddenly he appeared in Australia and I'm a celebrity. Get me out of here. First he ran out of the Royal Statistical Society when we asked him where was the evidence for asymptomatic transmission. Because if it was no asymptomatic transmission at the time when they locked down, then why did they lock down? Surely if the only people who are spreading the virus have got symptoms, then the only people who need to stay at home are those with symptoms. And all the rest of society can continue as normal. But that was the lie. By the way, in Wuhan, in May 2020, they knew this. They did a nucleic acid study of 10 million people in Wuhan in May 2020. They found 300 people who were so-called asymptomatic. They traced all their contacts. Not one single person amongst their contacts caught the virus. Not one. So they knew in 2020 that asymptomatic transmission was extremely unlikely or written out. And yet, the government, the entire foundation for lockdown was the argument that asymptomatic transmission is a major phenomena that means we must lock down everyone. That was the argument. Now here, just to come back to the Wuhan lab theory. Now, as I said, Zhong Nanshan, the leading guy in China on COVID-19, he published a paper showing SARS never disappeared. And that it was prevalent in China in 2012. Now here we have a paper from scientists in Italy, published in the journal Tumors, on October 2021. This study shows that in September of 2019, September, October, November, December were the first cases in Wuhan. In September of 2019, in Italy, 14% of plasma samples collected randomly showed seropositivity for SARS-CoV-2 in 2019 in September. And it takes about 3 weeks for antibodies to appear. So in other words, in August 2019, SARS-CoV-2 was endemic in Italy. Now, how can it be endemic in Italy if it wasn't endemic in England, or France, or Germany, or America, or Canada, or Australia, or New Zealand, or anywhere where we've got contact between these people, if it's spreading amongst the people in the way they describe? So that means that the idea that this has come from Wuhan has no foundation whatsoever. However, the idea, the theory, and we can verify, or if science is about making a proposition, I think this will happen, and then showing what can prove or refute that proposition. That's from the scientific philosopher by the name of Karl Popper. Refutability. So what is the refutability? If you do the same study that they did in Italy on their blood banks and plasma banks from 2019, 2018, 2017, 2000, 1998, 1950, 1930, and you test them to see if they test positive for SARS-CoV-2, why don't they do those studies? There are no such studies. Nobody is interested in knowing whether this has been around before 2019, because it undermines the narrative, and I'll be quite clear about this, the war narrative with China. That's what it's about. We are preparing to shift from war with Russia to war with China. And they want the mind of the population in the West to associate COVID-19 with a Chinese action that led, or errors, or incompetence, or disgusting behavior that led to the spread of this virus around the world that they claim has killed more than the Holocaust in Germany. That's what they claim. The Holocaust was supposed to have started in 1941 and ended in 1945. The official figures by the Germans are between 3 and 6 million dead. And yet, in the last 2 years, with the statistics on television, with the world in data, with the World Health Organization, with Anthony Fauci, with Bill Gates, they had these stats showing every day how many people died, where they died, how many people died, how many people injected, and they've gone past 6 million. They're more in 2 years, according to their figures, than the whole of the Holocaust in Germany. That's the claim. And of course the Chinese, they sat there in China until January this year. They had no lockdown from April 2020 until January 2022. There was no significant lockdown anywhere in China. So they were open. They had football matches, they had sports, they had dance clubs, they had water, sports, entertainment, clubs, venues, everything was open. So they were proud for 2 years. Look, the world's dying because they're incompetent. And we are not, because the government was good. That was the story the Chinese were told. Of course, now the Chinese, they look on television and they see China's going into lockdown all over, and yet the World Cup is going on and everyone's no longer got a mask on. And we're in a Hyde Park here, we haven't got a mask on. You go to Winter Wonderland and you haven't got a mask on. You didn't even wash your fucking hands. Sorry about my French. You didn't even wash your hands before you walked and shook your hand with somebody else. Or you picked your nose. Didn't wash your hand, did you? Admit it, you didn't. Now, the question then is, why the crisis in China now? 2 reasons. Over the last 40 years, China experienced the biggest human migration in history. 500 to 600 million people moved from the countryside to the cities, and they became new urbanites. They grew up on the land with animals. They grew up in farms. They grew up with wildlife. They have resilience to the natural infections that happen and transmissions of diseases and bacteria and viruses between man and animal over millennia, over the whole history of human existence. when you buy a dog, and you've got a dog as a pet, you don't think you exchange viruses and bacteria with your dog when you kiss it on the face? When it sneezes in your face? When it laps you on the face? You don't think that spreads viruses and bacteria and pathogens? It does, but your body becomes immune to them. So it is throughout history. That is how humanity, that's why Africa, I would suggest, that's why Africa had nothing to speak of outside South Africa in relation to COVID. Did they have vaccination? No. Bill Gates in March this year attended the Munich Security Conference. He said, I'll quote his exact word, unfortunately, Omicron vaccinated Africa more effectively and more rapidly than we could get to them with our injections. In other words, natural infection happened in Africa and hardly anyone died as a proportion of the population. And of course that was the danger, that people find that out. Maybe they would ask the question, was any of this necessary? Was any of this relevant? Did we really have to lock humanity down? Did we really have to give emergency permission for experimental mRNA vaccinations, which have significant side effects recorded on the VERS database and on the yellow card database in Britain? I won't talk about how many, but significant. Many people say the underestimation is enormous, as much as 100 times underestimation of the actual, but I don't know. I'm not an expert, I didn't collect the data. Then the question comes, are the Chinese servile and subordinate, like the Austrians, for example, who are being told they can't leave their home without a vaccine? Like the British care workers who were sacked, 40,000 of them. Wasn't it in the care homes that the most people died? Wasn't it there? And yet they sacked 40,000 care home workers if they didn't get a vaccination. Yet here we have the Financial Times 2 days ago. I quote you about China. A big problem lies in Chinese culture, which is more risk averse than many other countries when it comes to diseases and vaccines, said Shiran Andy Chen, an analyst at the China consultancy Trivium. While a relatively high vaccine hesitancy rate amongst China's elderly population predates the pandemic, the problem has been exacerbated by official messaging about the dangers of COVID over the last 2.5 years. This is the crux here. Despite the Communist Party's enormous powers of social control, ordering the elderly to vaccinate is viewed as a step too far, even for Xi Jinping, because of fears it would spark, quote, dramatic social resistance, unquote. Now, take a moment to think about what that means. We were told here, anyone who doesn't get a vaccination is mad. Anyone who doesn't get a vaccination is a plague rat. Anyone who doesn't get a vaccination is antisocial. And by the way, the old people were rolled off to the vaccination centres. In care homes, they came and injected them, often without asking their permission. In mental institutions, they injected them without asking their permission. In the army, they pressured them, you must get an injection. In the NHS, the constant pressure, have you been injected? Have you had your vaccine? Have you had your vaccine? An mRNA vaccine, a code implanted in a nanolipid particle, injected in the deltoid muscle and spreading all around the body. Some people say, some scientists like Arne Burkhardt in Germany, a pathologist who published peer-reviewed studies on this, examining the deaths of people at home who had had the mRNA vaccines, and he discovered autoimmune attacks on the body which he believed were caused by T-cell reactions to the appearance of the spike protein created and generated by the mRNA vaccines. Now, then the question comes, is China's vaccine the same as our vaccine? And here, I'm going to be quite clear, it is not. I would be perfectly honest in stating, I was never an anti-vaxxer, although the term changed. It used to mean someone who was opposed to vaccination in general. But actually what it means, someone who is opposed to vaccinations or someone who is opposed to mandatory vaccination. I am opposed to mandatory vaccination. So according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, I am an anti-vaxxer. Not because I've had plenty of injections, and I'm not saying that I would never take another injection. And if I were to take an injection against COVID, it would be the Sinovac. And it would be the Sinovac because it is what we call a vaccination. It is an inactivated virus injected into your body to stimulate an immune reaction. And that immune reaction protects you against the infection by a similar virus. Now, I would not take that vaccine because from my learning now in the last 2 years, vaccinations contain adjuvants, including aluminium and other things which are harmful to the body. So unless you really were in danger and the risk-benefit analysis was worthwhile, as with any medicine, by the way, a doctor is supposed to look at you. Are you ill? Do you have, I don't know, some liver problem that might go away on its own, or if you have good nutrition, or perhaps we can give you a pill for it. It will make it go away, but might have some side effects. You open even a packet of aspirin or a packet of paracetamol, and it has a little sheet of paper inside it, warning of certain side effects. You take Benylin for a cough, and it says in there, do not drive or operate machinery if you take Benylin. So it's the responsibility of the pharmaceutical industry and of doctors to warn you of the risk-benefit analysis of any medical intervention. And yet people were going for jab centres in England, marching up and queuing up with their mask on and getting jabbed by Joe Bloggs, who was trained to jab someone 3 days before on a one-day training course, and they injected them in the arm without even aspirating to check whether they'd hit into the blood vessel. Straight into the arm they do. Injections are supposed to be done, or historically always done, you inject, you pull back to see if it turns red. If it turns red, you've hit the blood vessel. Then you withdraw and start again, because you do not want to inject vaccines directly into the blood. Otherwise it doesn't serve its purpose. So, of course, COVID-19, we all know, is a respiratory infection. It comes from the mouth and the nose. The only place where you need to protect you, or the most likely place you need to be protected, is the mouth and the nose. COVID doesn't come in your arm. So that's another reason not to take a vaccine. But if you were to take a vaccine, if you're over 80, you've got 2 comorbidities, you're really scared that you're going to get COVID, and you might die of it, well then you might take a vaccine that is an inactivated virus, like the flu vaccine or like cholera vaccine or the other vaccines in the past. I'm not advocating that, but I'm saying that is at least a rational argument. The problem is in China, from the point of view of Bill Gates, from the point of view of Pfizer, from the point of view of Moderna, these people going to the park here now, they're not going and getting their booster, right? In Germany, France, England, America, people aren't going to get the booster anymore. They're a little bit weary. So what does it mean? It means we've got massive supplies of these drugs sitting and waiting with a shelf life on them. And the big companies want to find a buyer. The Chinese haven't been taking the Western vaccine. And the Western media have been saying, and Pfizer has been saying, and all the bigwigs have been saying, if only the Chinese took the mRNA vaccine, then they could open up. They've got a shitty vaccine, so that's why they can't open up. How could we open up? They said, well, we vaccinated 80-something% of the population in Britain. That's why we can open up, because you no longer die. That's what they said. Yes, we were wrong. You can infect other people. Yes, we were wrong. You can get ill with COVID if you've been vaccinated once, twice, 3 times. In fact, in Britain, the statistics were that those people dying now of COVID, largest percentage of them are triple vaccinated, or the highest proportion of any comparable levels are triple vaccinated old people. Now, so what does it mean? What was the purpose for the mRNA vaccine? It was to try out a brand new experimental technology on the world's population. But they didn't get Africa. They didn't get India. India made their own vaccines as well. And they haven't got China. But if the protests in China continue and the government comes under pressure, then of course Pfizer and the West will run up. We've got the solution. We've got the solution. Take the mRNA, roll out Pfizer, roll up for the great big stabbing program in China by the Western drug companies. That's the game. The world is a battlefield for market. The Western powers want the Chinese arms. Once upon a time, we used to make, at the time of the Opium Wars, 1830s, 40s, 1850s, when the British demanded that the Chinese take opium in exchange for silver, which helped the British. The British companies, they wanted to sell their goods to the Chinese. So Sheffield Steel decided, if only we can get the Chinese to eat with knives, forks and spoons, manufactured in Sheffield, then we'll have a massive market that will keep the Sheffield steel industry and cutlery industry running for 1,000 years and dominating the world. So too with clothing. If only they wore Western suits, then we could sell our textiles from Manchester and Lancashire to the Chinese for 1,000 years, making vast profits. And the Chinese didn't want to, so what did they do? They bombed China. They had 2 wars against China to force their drugs on the Chinese population. What do we have now? We had several years in Hong Kong. Hong Kong, by the way, existed as a British colony because of the Opium War. When Britain bombed China and the Chinese government was defeated militarily, Britain claimed Hong Kong for 150 years until 1997. So that's why in Hong Kong, by the way, over the last 5 years, the 5 years before 2019, Hong Kong was a battleground. Remember the pictures, the umbrella revolution, the violent scene, Molotov cocktails, people in gas masks, throwing Molotovs at the Chinese police. Some people who disagreed with them set on fire by protesters. And the West was screaming, China's not democratic, China's a dictatorship, China's imposing on Hong Kong, China's beating the Hong Kongers. That was the story, wasn't it? And now, of course, the same game is being played. Now, the protests in China are perfectly correct, just like our protests in Britain. They are justified. They are correct. They are aware. You know what happened? You know, they always say the Uyghurs are being repressed. The Uyghurs are in concentration camps. The Chinese people are repressing the Uyghurs. 2 days ago, there was a fire in Urumqi in Xinjiang. 10 people died, and people blamed the coronavirus restrictions for causing those deaths. 10 people died, and people now are protesting about that all over China. Well, I remember a few years ago, some of you might have forgotten, 2 miles from here in that direction, 80 people died in a fire in London. A preventable fire in London, in the Grenfell Tower. And those people were burnt alive because profit-making companies put cladding on the outside of the buildings to make it look national flag. In Xinjiang, where the Uyghurs are supposedly so oppressed, they were waving the Chinese flag and singing the Chinese national anthem. And the Chinese national anthem is not like the English national anthem. God save our gracious King. Long may he reign over us. The Chinese national anthem is "Rise up, ye who refuse to be slain. Rise up, rise up." That's the Chinese national anthem. It's the song of the volunteers. Ah, if we went on with a Renman, so 1 minute, 2, I don't know the whole thing, but like that, that's how it goes. And it ends, July, July, July. Rise up, rise up. That's what they're singing in China. And they're right. But rise up for what? Do not fall for the lies being propagated in the West. Because they will propagate war against China. They will propagate a new forced drug taking in China. But the forced drug taking will this time not be opium, as in the previous 2 wars that Britain fought against China. The war will be the mRNA vaccines and Western medicine. That's the idea. Therefore, I appeal to you. Analyse what's happening properly. Understand what happened to our world. Our world, by the way. Not China, our world. Understand that viruses and man. We live together. There's 120,000 viruses in your stomach. Different viruses in your stomach as I speak now. 120,000. By the way, I'm spreading another few thousand to you as I speak. And they're harmless. They're necessary. They're necessary for the existence of man and animal. And when they tell you there's a variant, this variant, that variant, it's nonsense. Viruses mutate every time they enter the cells of any living organism. They always mutate. It's the nature of viruses to mutate. They mutate to survive. Their only purpose of existence is to survive inside the cells of a living host. And that's why viruses cannot become a bioweapon. Because automatically, if this person is the first person to get a virus from this squirrel in Hyde Park, if he's the first person to get it, and he happens to come down really quick and spreads it to us here, within a few generations of transmission, it will weaken and weaken and weaken so that it survives inside the host and replicates. That is how it has been. That is how it is. That is how it will always be. Unless we destroy the human body's ability to live with these creatures, or to these pathogens, as they call them, viruses. If we destroy our ability to live with viruses or bacteria, then yes, you can have a huge culling of the world's population. Many people, I don't agree with them, but many people say, you know, there's a Malthusian agenda behind this. Some people think that less people on the world is a good thing, and some people do say that. Bill Gates is on record of saying things like that. He's an idiot. The only reason we really know about viruses the way we do, at least in popular consciousness, up until 2019, was because he spread all the bloody viruses through his computers. You know, remember the Windows program? You've got a virus, you've got a virus, you've got a virus. That's how we know about the bloody things, right? So, of course, real viruses are different to computer viruses, but that's how they created. There's psychology around this. So, what am I saying? The protests in China, what will happen? They will get bigger over the next few days. They will get to 5,000, maybe 10,000 in 1 or 2 cities in China. And then the government will give in. It won't say it's giving in because of the protest. It will say new evidence has come to light. And I'm providing them with the evidence here. The evidence is from China's leading epidemiologist. SARS never disappeared. And if SARS never disappeared, COVID-19 never appeared. And you can check whether this is true or not. You can verify the hypothesis by checking the blood banks going back before 2019 in England, America, Brazil, Africa, India, and so on. And if that's proven correct, then my thesis is correct. If that's not correct, then my thesis is wrong. But we know for a fact the virus that they claim exists and causes COVID-19 had a 14% prevalence in Italy in September 2019. On that note, I've tried to cover all the issues. Thanks very much for bearing with me. It was a lecture today rather than a speech, but I think it's an important issue. It's going to be in the news over the next week or 2 weeks and into the future, and I want you to understand the context within which this is all taking place. Thank you very much.
Well done, well done. Congrats. There you have it, guys. Live in Speaker's Corner. I'm just corner here, and this happens every winter in London. It's called Winter Wonderland, and over here is where people get together and they speak their piece. The person you are listening to, I come in here every week trying to listen to him. He's always got very, very good facts to tell you. Sometimes I learn a lot from him. I don't agree with him 100%, but most of the stuff I do agree with. And he's very, very good. He has agreed to come to my show. He's been banned on YouTube. He's been banned on all social medias, Twitter. So you're not going to find him on YouTube. You're not going to find him on Twitter. He does speak the truth. He's been arrested over 7 times. He's been taken to prison. He went through a lot of court cases. They have tried to shut him down. They have not been able to shut him down. So I'll try and get him into my show if people want to listen to more of him. He does come in here every week, so I'll try and come in here every week and I'll show you more of his speeches. He does speak a lot. I'm just walking through Speaker's Corner. As you can see, there's a lot of people speaking. Sorry guys, it's a bit dark here because sorry guys, it's a bit dark here, so it's much better in the day. So yeah, it's quite an entertaining place. If you guys ever come to London, make sure you come to Speaker's Corner. It's very, very entertaining. It's a place where everyone kind of comes here and chats and talk about their points and stuff. And it's all good. It's all good, guys. Frank, by the way, guys, I can't message you guys. I can't see your messages because I'm on the phone, and for some reason on the phone I can't see what you guys are typing, and I can't seem to type what you type and reply. So apologies if I'm not being able to respond to you. I know Frank's here because I did see when I opened my app on YouTube, I did see Frank for a bit. So gonna have a chat with you later on, Frank. Looking forward to it. And let me know what you guys think of his chat, guys. If you guys got any questions about it, make sure you go in the comment section. Make sure you guys reply in the comment section whether you agree or don't or disagree. I think he made some excellent points. He does have a lot of knowledge around the world. And like I said, he's banned in YouTube. So anybody that's banned in YouTube, anybody that's banned in social media, you know that the government will try and shut them down some way or other. So yeah, guys, we're almost reaching the 1 hour mark. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe if you want to see more of this. And if you want to see him more, then don't forget to like, share, subscribe. I'll go in the comment section. And I'll see you guys soon, hopefully. Take care for now.